for the parents who expressed some interest and weren't able to attend. So again, I'm Fred Werner, and I am a teacher by trade and by that's my educational background. I have a background in environmental sciences, and I was teaching environmental science and sustainable design as a component of that. And then the Architecture Foundation brought me in to run a program they used to run in the high schools in San Francisco called Build SF, Build San Francisco, which was a fantastic program where students would leave their high school on for half the school day and come downtown to our offices, where they were taught by a credentialed teacher, which was me, and they were getting credit in architecture and design. They were getting credit in environmental science, and they were also getting credit for an internship program. So that right there is already encapsulating a lot of what AFSF is about. So I just want to do a very short run through of what AFSF is all about, and then also talk a little bit about other opportunities that we have for your students. And I'll also maybe explain a little bit about the college and career paths, and then answer any questions that you guys have.
Great.
So let me pull up. I do have a slideshow somewhere. Share my screen. All right, so here is my very brief welcome to you all to the Architectural Foundation. So first off, what is your sense already from what you've seen online or heard from your kids? What's your sense of what AFSF is all about?
I'll admit, I don't know if I have a great answer for that.
What's your gut sense of like what it is that we're doing, what it is that we're offering? And there's no wrong answers here. It's really, it's almost for my info to have a sense of what you guys are already thinking.
Yeah, but I think it's exposure. You know, to thinking about what architecture is, some base elements of it, and why it's potentially interesting, either as a career path or just even as a as something just to be interested in more generally. So
great.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just echo that. I think, and maybe not even specific to design, but or to architecture, but just more design generally as well. I was sort of hoping for him to get a little bit of that, just sort of broader perspective as well. And it's cool that it's kind of like locally focused, which I think is kind of awesome too.
Yeah, agreed.
Exactly, and that's been a hallmark since the founding of the organization, and I'll get into that a little bit. So we have a mission statement, which is that our mission is to enhance the awareness and appreciation of architecture and the design process in the local community. And the way we're doing that is primarily through programs for high school students. We do some other programs as well, but almost the vast majority of what we do is really geared towards educational programs for high schoolers. And in particular, we are not trying to train architects. We are not a credentialing or certification program. We're not even necessarily trying to convince kids to become architects. We're trying to give them some, as you both mentioned, some exposure, some experience, some connection with professionals in the design world and the engineering world, and just a real sense of their own capacity to be designers of the future built environment, and also to be informed and engaged citizens at wherever they end up, having an understanding of how things get built and what it takes to what goes into actually creating the environment, the built environment that they're living in. So that's really what we're about. We started in 1990 as a summer program. The superintendent of San Francisco schools asked an architect to take some kids on as give them an internship for the summer. And so we brought some kids in and had them kind of follow them around, go to work sites, sit on meetings. And he realized these kids were really bored. They were like, the whole thing was just boring to them because they had no context. So we went back to the superintendent. He said, I got a better idea for next summer. I got some other architecture friends. we're going to do a little training institute, and we're going to actually teach them what this is all about, so they have some context when they're tagging along. So that's what they did. That's really how this was started, was to give high school students both the exposure and connection to the professional world, but also some kind of crash course education and what this is all about and where they can fit into it, what they can do with it. So we've had a number of programs over the years. I mentioned the Build SF high school program that currently isn't running, but hopefully will be again. We have a Summer Design Institute. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. We've had other programs in partnership with the schools, with the city Department of Youth and Family Programs. We have a Future Grads partnership with the SF Police Department, where they send us interns. So we have an executive director, who's Alan Sandler, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. And we have a board of directors who are a broad range of community members, including a number of architects and engineers, but there's a very broad range on our board. And we have over 200 architects, engineers, interior designers, landscape architects from more than 50 different firms that participate with us as mentors. So we have studios that we have not been working out of, really. We haven't had students in our studios since pre-pandemic, but we still have our studios ready and waiting to go with live programs again at some point. In the Chronicle building at 5th and Mission, right near the Powell Street BART, across the street from the Mint and Westfield Mall. And we have an entire digital studio. We have equipment for physical model building and physical. We don't do a lot of drafting per se, but we do a fair bit of sketching and modeling in both physical with hands and digitally. And in almost all of our programs, very few exceptions, we place one of the key components is placing our students in mentorships, whether it's live in person or digitally via Zoom. We basically have architects, engineers who volunteer to spend an hour or two of their week with a student. In some cases it's 2 students or 3, even 3 at a time, but usually it's one-on-one, and they're getting to hear the career trajectory and the path of an architect, which is never a straight and narrow path. It's always an arc. So I think it's always useful for students to hear that they don't have to commit to one thing and they're stuck to that they can explore, that following your interests can be fruitful. And they get feedback on the work that they're doing with us. They get feedback on projects and their own work to elevate that as well. And they get to envision themselves in this context and to see themselves as a professional, whether it's something they want to do or whether they realize, oh, I want to be doing something else. It puts them in that field where they can actually experience and say, like, oh yeah, I can be here, I can do this, which is really what we're about. So we partner with again a broad range of firms around the city, and increasingly we have firms outside the city, especially now that our programming is online. We have both students and mentors participating from outside the state and even outside the country. But primarily we're still San Francisco based. We partner with the school district. We partner with the city. We partner with a number of community organizations. And I'll talk about one of the programs, MyEap, who sends us a number of different interns from their program as well. So we're offering what we consider professional-based learning. So students are learning professional skills and professional tools, especially the digital tools, and they're gaining key skills towards college and a career. And I just want to pause here just to mention, like I said, we aren't trying to push students into any specific career, but we do mention, we do emphasize, just so students are aware of the options for becoming an architect in California. Essentially, you have to take your certification exam, and just to take the exam, you have to have an accredited degree. And there are two different degrees that are offered, two types of degrees. There's either the Bachelor in Architecture or the Master's in Architecture. And so the Bachelor's in Architecture program is a typically 5-year program that students start in as freshmen in college. And those tend to be pretty hardcore, pretty focused for kids coming out of high school. They know they want to be an architect. Some of the schools that offer that include San Luis Obispo, City College of the Arts offers that. There's only a few schools in California that offer that. And I'll send all the parents a list of all the schools that offer accredited programs. So that's one program. You do a 5-year bachelor's, and then you're qualified to sit for the exam. The other option is to do whatever you want for an undergraduate. Do regular 4 years of college in art, history, science, whatever you want, any topic, and then do a master's in architecture, which is typically a 2-year program. In some cases, it's 3. That is recommended for students who, coming out of high school especially, either they don't know they want to be an architect, or they want to broaden their interest. They want to explore more broadly first before really narrowing into architecture. And some schools will only offer one or the other. So for example, UC Berkeley has an architecture degree that's not, that would be, it's not the Bachelor's of Architecture that you can actually become an architect. You still need the master's. UC Berkeley offers the accredited master's in architecture, the MArch, but only the MArch. You have to do basically a 4 years undergraduate, either at UC Berkeley or somewhere else first, and then do the master's. And people recommend one or the other. A lot of architects, most of our architects that we work with, are increasingly recommending the master's. They're increasingly recommending students to go broad in their first forays in higher education, and then come into architecture with some other refined skills, whether it's in art, or whether it's in urban planning, or whether it's in something else, and then go into that master's in architecture. But it's really a personal preference, and both are very popular options. So okay, so what are our students doing with us? So they're designing. They're doing a lot of digital design, especially now that we're online. It's mostly digital design. There's a number of different platforms that we've been offering an experience with. The two main ones that we're using right now, and that students in the Saturday program are learning, is Revit, which is an Autodesk program, and SketchUp, which is it's by a company called Trimble, and they have a free web-based program. We kind of emphasize that we are not a training or certification program. We are basically offering these, and I give very short kind of crash course in, here's how you can start a project in these, and here's how you can add the elements you want and create the views you want. Go to it. And we try to really emphasize the design process, the creative process, and not get too caught up in the specifics of the tools. It's not a course in the software. It's a course in problem solving, really. So along those lines, we address the range of problems that we want.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel.
And so, for example, my own personal emphasis is environmental and sustainability. So we do a lot with that, with sustainable design, with sustainable use of resources and energy, and designing to solve environmental problems instead of adding to them. So we also emphasize designing for the community. We do a whole program in designing for civic engagement. I'll talk briefly about our Design Ideas Collective, which is kind of a it's kind of a competition, but not a heavy emphasis on competition. But it's an invitation for students around the Bay Area and around the world to offer their ideas for designing public spaces this year. So we do a lot with designing, encouraging students to design youth centers, fitness centers, community spaces, libraries, spaces that students or parks, students that are that youth are engaged in and interested in, and also that address some of our pressing issues of homelessness and affordability and housing and gentrification, as well as dealing with transportation and congestion. So students, generally, especially in our longer programs, will do more research where we'll have them actually research the topics and present on whether it's civic engagement or sustainability. They'll create their own presentations of suggested design approaches to solve and address these issues. We also have every student create a portfolio of their original work, which is a very simple compilation of both original designs and their research projects. Basically, just something that it's something they could print as a PDF and attach to a college application or an application to another internship to say like, hey, here's some skills I have. Here's what I've already done. So very briefly, here's a few of our programs. Your students are already enrolled in our Saturday Design Studio. We have coming up right now, actually active, our Design Ideas Collective, which I mentioned, and I'll show in just a moment that it's on our website already. We also do a high school design competition in the spring, and this is actually a program we inherited that's been going for over 50 years. And every year, students basically create a design proposal to fit a challenge, and then we have a team of architects and engineers, other designers, who serve as judges and award prizes that include college scholarships and such. And just as an example, the one year the challenge was to design a music teaching pavilion, a music school at Fort Mason. Another year when the Super Bowl was in San Francisco, the design challenge was to create a temporary pavilion near Giant Stadium as part of the Super Bowl was, of course, actually not in San Francisco. It was at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. But this was to create basically San Francisco's home base for the Super Bowl. We've had teams design new facilities for Crab Cove Park, which is a new park on the eastern waterfront of San Francisco. So it's always a real world challenge. The Design Ideas Collective is like that. It's even more open-ended. And then we have our Summer Design Institute, which you might consider for your students. Basically, it's 3 weeks in the summer. We usually have one program before the 4th of July and one after the 4th of July. It's 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. So it's 15 hours a week. And with a substantial amount of time, students are able to dive deeper in both individual and group projects and research projects and presentations. And the final day always involves presenting group team projects that they've been working on to a panel of design professionals who offer their feedback on their designs. And again, those are always real world based design challenges that they're working in teams on. And that also involves mentoring. And since it's only a 3-week program, mentoring is twice a week. So they still meet their mentors for six times over the course of those 3 weeks. And the exact dates of those and all the other and the registration form, all that will be live, hopefully by December, certainly by January at the latest. And then we have our programs through the police department and through the city of San Francisco, which are they offer paid internships for youth from disadvantaged communities. And the funding comes from the mayor's office, where they're basically paying at-risk youth to get substantive pre-professional experience. So they're basically paid to take our programs and to gain some experience with us. And we're happy to participate in those and support those as well. So the last thing I do want to switch share. I want to show our design ideas collective a little bit more in detail. If I can. So I'm going to do a new share. This is on our website. We have the Design Ideas Collective, and this, as I mentioned, is an opportunity for students to work individually or in teams to come up with a creative solution to a design challenge. So this year's challenge is recognizing the reality of how the use of urban spaces has changed dramatically due to the pandemic. We're encouraging students to come up with, well, how would they envision a vibrant, thriving urban public space in the context of COVID and post-COVID. So there is a design brief which is created by one of the architects that works with us, a guy named Ryan Lee, who's fantastic. He was a student at Lowell High School, and he won our high school design competition, I think all 4 years, or maybe 3 of his 4 years in high school. He went to college and grad school, got his I forget which degree he got, but he's now an architect at a firm called Woods Bagot, which is near Union Square. And he now runs our competitions. He creates the competitions that he used to win when he was in high school. And he sometimes mentors youth like he was mentored when he was in high school. So it's kind of one of those full circle deals. So he came up with this basically request for proposals, encouraging students to come up with a design for how a city like San Francisco should respond to the dramatic changes in our population and how the city is used given COVID. So what would a mixed use development look like? What would a park or a plaza look like? What would be an appealing, attractive public space that would draw people in our current context and get people engaged with each other and with their community? It's more open-ended, as I said, than the high school design competition, which is coming in the spring. And it's also, there's less emphasis on this being a competition, although there are still awards offered, but it's really encouraging participation as broadly as possible. So I've announced this, I showed this to the students this morning, and I encourage all of them to take part and to reach out to a teacher of theirs for support if they have to help guide them through the process, to reach out to their mentors for feedback and suggestions, and also to reach out to Ryan. He's really accessible and available to help coach students and teachers through this process.
You said that so when are submissions due for that? Like, so
so they're 5 weeks from yesterday. It's Friday, December 9th is when the submissions are due, and that weekend a team of designers and engineers, architects, other designers will review all the submissions, and we're gonna have an award ceremony that Sunday the 11th, and everything's online still. And we are inviting participation from beyond the Bay Area, beyond California even. That at that award ceremony on Sunday, they'll review what they thought were what the panel thought were some of the most intriguing or noteworthy submissions. So Friday the 9th, submissions have to be entered online, and then the panel has the weekend until that Sunday to review them and comment on them.
Great.
All right, so that is my half-hour intro to the Architecture Foundation of San Francisco. What other questions do you guys have about any of our programs, about the current Saturday design program? Oh, one thing I was going to mention, the summer design this year is going to be taught by someone. The previous years, I've usually taught the summer design program. This summer, at least one of the programs, if not both, one or both of them is going to be taught by someone else. We have an architect named Trish Callow, who taught one of our summer programs last summer. And she also runs, we do a program in Antioch, which is actually for transitional age youth. It's basically 18 to 24-year-olds who have left high school, either they dropped out or they graduated, and they're kind of not really on they're not in college, or they're not really on a track
As much as you
for
want.
career. So we offer this program as an opportunity to glimpse a possible career track for them.
That's very
And
cool.
she runs that, and she did one of our summer programs last year. So she'll have a very different approach. Her teaching approach is very different than mine. I mean, pros and cons, of course. Just to say that if your student is going to take the Summer Design Institute this summer, it won't be a repeat of what they've done with me.
Cool.
So.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, I had some
Go
background
ahead,
noise
Eric.
there. The question I have, and maybe you already touched on it a little bit, I think, with the summer design program, but as we think about Zara's a freshman today, and again, I'm trying to get her hopefully get her some exposure and thought around this, not necessarily push her to be an architect, but if she leans into it a lot, is this something that, like, is there, I know you just walked through the summer program, the design collective, the competition, and so on. As she's a freshman, she goes to sophomore, junior, and so on. Would there be additional things through whatever the acronym is here?
Yes, AFSF is the acronym.
AFSF.
It would be nice if it was pronounceable.
Exactly, through AFSF. Are there, is it sort of like something that is cumulative, that you could grow with it over as you think over a 4-year period, or is it the kind of thing that how should we be thinking about that in terms of her continued engagement?
Yeah, it's interesting. We used to offer a 2 and even a 3-year sequence when we were in the high schools. We don't structure it that way. The high school design competition is different every year, and we certainly have students who participate 4 years in a row with that, and that ends up being not sequentially, in the sense that it's not a direct reference, but being a different challenge every year. We definitely see students progress and students' skills evolve over time through that. And also, given now that the different instructors that we have for the different programs, like I mentioned, me teaching one program, Tris teaching another, that's one way to give students multiple different basically different courses, different learning different skills and approaching design from with different emphasis and from a different perspective.
Okay, and then guys, one more question.
Sure.
And you mentioned, I can't remember related to which, but that you don't do a lot of drafting today, and obviously as we're doing this thing virtual, that I would think that the computer program is probably the way they would go. But is there a future where, and this is an honest question, of like, are they ever going to draft? Or like, are they ever going to put pencil to paper, or is it truly
they still put pencil to paper. They still absolutely are drawing and sketching. Formal drafting and creating floor plans and blueprints by hand, that may be going away. There is a teacher at Lowell who was famous for teaching drafting, and he recently retired, and they didn't replace him, which I think is unfortunate. You will hear some architects who are adamant about maintaining this, keeping this alive, and seeing it as a valuable skill. The digital tools have become so efficient and powerful that I think there has been a big move away from formal drafting by hand. But there are still schools teaching it, and there are still professionals who swear by it, who want to be able to see it that way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And like I said, like everybody, I don't know anybody who doesn't see value in drawing by hand, in sketching what you see, and having a sketch pad, and just drawing out what you see with. And of course, there's digital tools for those too, and some people prefer those. But we still have all of our students doing at least some work on paper.
What about face-to-face? Are you guys going to be back at some point?
It's a really good question. The absolute earliest is this coming summer, and even that is kind of iffy. To be honest, the pandemic broadened the involvement to an extent where We're not sure if we could do a hybrid program or if we would need to offer separate programs for local participation versus in person versus participation from abroad. I mean, we've had students zooming in from Kazakhstan, China, Egypt, Brazil. We have students coming from all over. So it's we want to continue that. And at the same time, we recognize that there's real value for the in-person work. So it's an open question. Our mentoring, we have a number of mentors who are meeting with students in person, and we're doing that on an individualized basis. We're still emphasizing that we're offering everything online, and we're asking our mentors to as well. But some mentors only want to see their interns in person, and I get that. And some students only want to be in person. I get that too. So where that's possible and desired, and everybody's on board and agreeing with whatever the conditions are in terms of health, safety, COVID protocols, whatever they're agreeing to, as long as parents and mentors are all officially actually agreeing to everything, we're fine with in-person mentoring, and especially if it's outdoors with site visits and all of that. But as far as actually getting students back in our studio and on our computers in our studio, that I can't say when that's going to happen yet.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for everything. I have to run, unfortunately, but Fred, thank you so much for everything you're doing for the kids. I really appreciate it. And it's just good work you guys do.
Great. Well, it's fun for me personally, and it's great to see kids getting into this and really diving in and taking it and flying with it. So I'm happy to be a part of it. So
that's
thanks.
awesome.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Hey, I have one more question as she hops off there.
Yeah.
I was just in Chicago this week, and while I didn't take the tour, apparently there's a great architecture tour of Chicago.
I took it 3 weeks ago. I was in Chicago.
You get out, really?
Yes, first week of September, and there's a number of tours. We did a boat tour where there's an architectural boat tour down the Chicago River, pointing out the history, and it's fantastic. And I've done walking tours with them too, and the Chicago Architectural Society that runs those, they have such a fantastic array of programs, and they have this huge cadre of volunteer docents who lead these walks who are really knowledgeable, and it's fantastic. And I've suggested to our executive director, Alan Sandler, that we try something like that. And it's a little bit trickier. San Francisco people visiting Chicago for whatever reason, a conference, family, whatever they're there for. Architecture is one of the greatest things Chicago has to offer. And it's one of the things people look for. So they have that as kind of a base. There are all kinds of tours that are already offered around San Francisco. There's tours of earthquake damage. There's tours of weird, freaky history. There's tours, the Alcatraz and the Bay and the Golden, there's the Golden Gate and the natural features. So if finding our niche in terms of what we would offer and how that would fit into there's all kinds of tours by segways and all kinds of things that are already be offered. So where would we step in is not 100% clear, but I'm with you. I wish we would offer something.
That'd be really interesting.
Yes, because there is a lot of
even I wonder if there's even just, and this would be slightly easier and more complex depending on which way you look at it, but also just a build your own walking tour where you could have, depending on the neighborhood that you're in, and and then if you could be okay, you're standing in front of the Trans-American building, right? And then you pull up on an app or something like that to be okay, here's everything, here's a 5-minute spiel about the Trans-America building. That's someone that knows something what the Trans-America building is. Almost like so it's an independent tour with your own docent. That might be sort of interesting, because that way you're not relying upon getting segues and whatever, blah, blah, blah. Now it's just something that you can be oh, this is really neat. I happen to be in this part of town, what is there interesting architecturally
Yeah, it could be
around
just
that.
it could be just an app. You pull up the app and and it
Yeah.
tells you something about where you are. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's a great
that'd be
idea.
really
You know
neat.
what? We do something with our students. We do a scavenger hunt where we send
Huh.
students running around the city finding specific points of interest, structures that have a particular history or design interest. We haven't, but and like I said, that I would love to see that leverage to a broader
Yeah.
audience. I
Yeah,
totally agree.
that's really neat.
Yeah, I
That's
think
really
I think
cool.
it's very
It's also great to hear you say that about Chicago, and I'm bummed that I didn't do it. But I went for a run. I was staying right in downtown. Went for a run along the lake, come back down the river, and we were with my colleague that I was with. He's actually quite into architecture, and he actually lives in southern Texas, and he lives in a really small old town in southern Texas that has some really unique architecture. And he's very involved in the town and trying to make sure that doesn't just become suburban sprawl, and how do you build interesting neighborhoods and so on. So anyway, so he has an interest in it. As we were walking up the river, just being able to see I believe it is the Tribune building and it's just fascinating to look at those buildings where they took the upper third of that building and more or less made it just beautiful. Like it's no longer like it doesn't have the same utility, of course, but they just made it just gorgeous. And just seeing that and seeing, I don't know what the clock tower building is, but there's a clock tower building that's right there. And anyway, it's just a really spectacular city, and being able to see that stuff in there is really pretty neat. And to recognize and in fairness, some of the modern architecture as well that they have is also quite interesting.
Yeah, and even you were probably on this, but the Riverwalk itself, that whole pedestrian way is actually a fairly recent addition.
That's what I heard.
That's already like very beloved, and so it's fascinating to see. It's an ongoing, current work in progress that's still evolving.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. I grew up in the Midwest, and so I've been going to Chicago for forever. But I guess I didn't realize that was relatively recent. The walking, the walking path by the river there. So yeah, it's pretty. Anyway,
yeah, there's even one stretch of it which has underneath and tucked in, they built a fish hatchery, and they've restored like 15 species of fish to the Chicago River. So
wow, that's very cool.
No,
that's really neat.
Yeah, if next time you're in Chicago, I highly recommend the boat tour if you can, if the weather is amenable. They only do it. I think they stop like late October, and I think it starts again in May or something. But but the boat tour is fantastic, and any of the tours of the Chicago Architectural Society, they're all, it's definitely worthwhile.
Very, very cool. Yeah. Very neat. That's really fun that you were just there and did it.
Yeah,
that's fantastic to hear.
I was there for a family event, and my partner and I were like, let's go downtown for a day and do the tour, and it was great.
Oh, neat. That's great. Well, good. Well, hey, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I think it's great exposure to the kids to to think about these different fun things to do, and plus she's having fun with it, which is neat. I think she told me today she created a Starbucks. So,
nice.
There you go.
Nice. Awesome.
So
very cool.
Yeah. So many fun stuff
cool.
every week. So yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Much appreciated, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too. You're very welcome.
All right. Cheers.
Bye-bye.